Welcome to Revenge by Eve. We've got a great story for you today.
I stood in what used to be my grandmother's house, holding a document that proved my entire family had been stealing from me for 3 years, and they had no idea I knew. Before this story goes any further, tell me, would you have confronted them immediately or done what I did? And as you listen, comment where you're listening from. I read everyone. My grandmother's name was Eleanor Castellano, and she was the kind of woman who made you believe that goodness actually existed in the world. She raised me. Not officially, not on paper, but in every way that mattered. My parents were young when they had me, 21 and barely holding their lives together. My father worked construction, my mother waited tables, and neither of them had the time or energy to raise a child, so my grandmother stepped in. I spent every afternoon after school at her house, a beautiful old Victorian on Maple Street with a wraparound porch and gardens that bloomed year-round. She'd be waiting for me at the kitchen table with milk and homemade cookies, asking about my day like it was the most important conversation she'd ever have. She taught me how to cook, how to sew, how to balance a checkbook and change a tire and stand up for myself without raising my voice. She taught me that kindness wasn't weakness, that strength came from knowing who you were and never apologizing for it. Every Sunday we'd sit on her porch and she'd tell me stories about her life, growing up during the Depression, meeting my grandfather at a USO dance, building a business from nothing when women weren't supposed to do such things. She'd started a small real estate company in the 70s, back when people laughed at the idea of a woman selling houses. But she'd built it into something successful, something that mattered. This will all be yours one day, she'd tell me, gesturing to the house, the gardens, everything she'd built. You're the one who understands what it means to work for something. You're the one who'll take care of it. I never thought about inheritance. I just thought about her, about the woman who showed up to every school play, every graduation, every moment my own parents were too busy to attend. The woman who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. When I turned 18, I moved into her house officially. She was getting older and I wanted to help take care of her the way she'd taken care of me. My parents were relieved. It meant they didn't have to worry. My younger sister Morgan was still at home with them, and she'd always been the one who got their attention anyway. Those years living with my grandmother were the best of my life. We had our routines, morning coffee on the porch, Sunday dinners, evening walks through the neighborhood. She'd tell me about the properties she was managing, ask my opinion on things, teach me the business from the ground up. You're a natural at this, she'd say. You have good instincts. You see what properties could be, not just what they are. I loved that work. I loved walking through old houses and imagining their potential. I loved the negotiations, the paperwork, the satisfaction of helping someone find their home. My grandmother started officially bringing me on as her assistant, or teaching me everything she knew. When I'm gone, she'd say, and I'd always interrupt her. Don't talk like that. You're going to live forever. She'd smile that knowing smile. When I'm gone, I want you to keep this going. The business, the house, everything we've built. Promise me you'll take care of it. I promise. I meant it with everything I had. My family would visit sometimes. My parents, my sister, my Uncle Vincent, who lived 2 towns over. They'd sit in the living room and make small talk, but I could tell they were uncomfortable. My grandmother had always had a complicated relationship with her own children. She loved them, but she'd been disappointed by them more times than she could count. My father borrowed money he never paid back. My Uncle Vincent had stolen from the business once years ago, and she'd forgiven him but never forgotten. My mother just wanted to be done with the responsibility of caring for anyone but herself. They didn't show up the way I did. They didn't sit with her during her doctor's appointments or hold her hand during the bad nights. They didn't know her favourite tea or which pills she took in the morning or that she liked to watch game shows at 3 p.m. But they were family, and when she got sick, they suddenly started showing up. The cancer diagnosis came on a Tuesday in March. Pancreatic. Stage 4. The doctor said 6 months, maybe less. I held her hand in that sterile office and tried not to fall apart. She squeezed my fingers and looked at me with eyes that were still bright, still sharp. "We'll get through this," she said, but I could see the fear underneath. And I could see something else: urgency. The next day, she asked me to take her to see her lawyer, Martin Shepherd. He'd been handling her legal affairs for 30 years. I drove her to his office in the old brick building downtown, helped her up the stairs, sat next to her as she outlined what she wanted. "I'm updating my will," she told him. "I want to make sure everything is clear, everything is protected." She looked at me. "Eve gets the house, the business, everything. She's the one who's been here. She's the one who'll take care of it." I started to protest. This felt too heavy, too final, but she held up her hand. "This is what I want. No arguments." Martin nodded and took notes. "I'll draw up the documents. We'll need 2 witnesses for the signing." "We'll come back next week," she said, but next week came and went. And we didn't go back. Because suddenly everyone started appearing. My father started calling every day. My mother showed up with casseroles and concerned expressions. My uncle Vincent came by with flowers and apologies. My sister Morgan, who I barely heard from anymore, started visiting on weekends. At first I was grateful. She was dying, and they were finally showing up. Better late than never, right? But then I noticed things. The way they'd pull her aside for private conversations. The way they'd go quiet when I entered a room. The way my Uncle Vincent would sit at her dining table with papers spread out, talking in low voices about logistics and planning. "What are you discussing?" I asked once. "Just helping Mom get her affairs in order," my father said smoothly. "Don't worry about it." But I did worry. Why? Because something felt wrong. My grandmother started getting tired more easily. The medications made her foggy, made her forget things. She'd repeat herself or lose track of conversations. The sharp, brilliant woman I knew was fading, and in her place was someone vulnerable. Someone they could manipulate. I tried to stay close, to monitor every conversation, but I had to work. I had to keep the real estate business running, handle the clients, manage the properties. My grandmother insisted on it. "Don't let everything fall apart because of me," she'd say. "Keep working. I'm fine." So I did. And in my absence, my family moved in. They started staying at the house. My father claimed he needed to be close to help with her care. My Uncle Vincent said he was taking time off work to be supportive. Even Morgan started sleeping in one of the guest rooms, saying she wanted to spend time with Grandma before it was too late. I came home one evening to find the 3 of them in the study with my grandmother. She looked exhausted, her hands trembling slightly. Papers were spread across the desk. "What's going on?" I asked. My father looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "Just going over some financial stuff with Mom, making sure everything's organized. She has a lawyer for that. We're family, Eve. We can help too." My grandmother looked at me and I saw something in her eyes. Was it confusion? Fear? But before I could say anything, my Uncle Vincent stood up. "We're almost done here. Why don't you go start dinner?" I felt dismissed. In my own home, in the house where I'd lived and cared for her while they were absent. But I didn't want to upset her, so I left. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the papers on the desk, the way they'd closed ranks around her, the way she'd looked at me. Something was very, very wrong. Over the next few weeks, my family's behavior became increasingly strange. They were always there, always hovering, always pulling my grandmother into private conversations that ended when I appeared. My Uncle Vincent took control of her medications, saying he wanted to make sure she was taking them on schedule. My father started handling her mail, sorting through it in the study with the door closed. Morgan suddenly became interested in my grandmother's finances, asking questions about her accounts and properties. I tried to talk to my grandmother alone, but it was almost impossible. Someone was always there. When I finally managed to catch her by herself one afternoon, I sat down next to her bed. "Grandma, are you okay? Is everything all right with Dad and Uncle Vincent?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw tears in her eyes. "I'm so tired, Eve. I'm so tired and confused. They keep asking me to sign things, to make decisions, and I don't remember what I've agreed to. My blood ran cold. What have you signed? I don't know. Papers. They said it was to help you, to make sure everything was taken care of. To help me? She nodded weakly. They said you couldn't handle everything alone, that I needed to make sure the business didn't fall apart, that the properties were managed properly. I felt sick. Grandma, I need you to listen to me. Don't sign anything else. Not without me there. Not without your lawyer. Or, do you understand? She gripped my hand. Did I do something wrong? No. No, of course not. I just want to make sure you're protected. But I was too late. I could feel it. The next morning I called Martin Shepherd. I need to know if my grandmother has made any recent changes to her legal documents. There was a pause. I can't discuss that without her permission, Eve. She has cancer, she's dying, and my family is circling her like vultures. Please, I need to know if she's changed her will. Another pause. She hasn't been to see me since that day you brought her in March. As far as I know, her will stands as she dictated it. Everything to you. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. But the relief was short-lived, because 2 days later my grandmother died. She passed peacefully in her sleep, which was the only mercy in any of it. I found her that morning, still and cold in her bed. I sat next to her for a long time, holding her hand, saying goodbye to the woman who'd been more of a mother to me than my own. My family arrived within hours. My father made the funeral arrangements. My Uncle Vincent called the lawyer. My mother started going through my grandmother's things, packing them up with an efficiency that felt obscene. What are you doing? I asked, watching her fold my grandmother's clothes. We need to get the house ready to sell, she said matter-of-factly. Sell? This is my house. Grandma left it to me. My father appeared in the doorway. About that, Eve. We need to talk. We gathered in the living room, me, my parents, my Uncle Vincent, and Morgan. They all looked at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Or your grandmother made some changes before she died, my father said. She was worried about you handling everything on your own, so she updated her will. She what? My Uncle Vincent pulled out a document. She divided everything equally among all of us. The house, the business, the properties. We're all inheriting together. I stared at him. That's not possible, she told me. She changed her mind, Morgan said. She wanted to be fair to everyone. Fair? Where were you all for the last 20 years? Where were you when she needed help? When she was sick? We were here, my father said firmly, and she recognized that. These last few months we were all here for her. You're lying. My Uncle Vincent slid the document across the coffee table. It's all here, witnessed and notarized. Her signature, dated 2 weeks before she died. I picked up the paper with shaking hands, and there it was. A new will, dividing everything equally. And at the bottom, my grandmother's signature, shaky, barely legible, but legally valid. This isn't real, I whispered. It's very real, my father said. And the lawyer has already validated it, so we need to start making decisions about how to handle everything. The house needs to be sold, the business liquidated. No. Eve, be reasonable. You forged this, or you coerced her. She would never have done this. She was of sound mind, my Uncle Vincent said. The witnesses can attest to that. What witnesses? Family friends, people who cared about her. People you paid off, I thought, but didn't say. I looked at my sister, who'd been silent through all of this. Morgan, you know this is wrong. Or you know Grandma wanted me to have this. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I think Grandma wanted all of us to be taken care of. They'd gotten to her too. I stood up, still holding the document. I'm going to fight this. You can try, my father said, but it'll cost you everything you have in legal fees and you'll lose. This is a legal will, properly executed. You don't have a case. We'll see about that. I walked out of that house, my house, and drove straight to Martin Shepherd's office. Martin looked at the document with a frown that deepened with every line he read. I didn't prepare this, he said finally. Can you tell if it's legitimate? The signature looks authentic, but... Eve, your grandmother would have told me if she was changing her will. We'd worked on this for years. She was very clear about her wishes. So, what do I do? He set the document down. You can contest it, but your father's right. It will be expensive, and there's no guarantee you'll win. The will appears to be properly executed. If the witnesses verify her competency at the time of signing, they coerced her. She was dying, she was on medications, she wasn't herself. Can you prove that? I couldn't. That was the problem. I left Martin's office feeling hollow. Everything my grandmother had worked for, everything she'd wanted me to have, was being stolen by the people who should have protected it. I went back to the house that evening to collect some of my things. My uncle Vincent was in the study going through files. My father was on the phone with a realtor. My mother and Morgan were discussing paint colours for staging the house. Oh, they were erasing her, erasing us, erasing everything we'd built. I stood in the doorway of my grandmother's bedroom. It still smelled like her lavender hand cream. Her reading glasses were still on the nightstand. Her quilt was still folded at the foot of the bed. And I broke. I sat on the floor and cried until I couldn't breathe. Cried for her, for me, for everything we'd lost. Cried because I was alone, because I'd been betrayed, because I didn't know how to fix this. When I finally stopped, when the tears dried up and left me empty, I looked around that room and I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them win. That was the moment I stopped waiting for them to change. I left the house that night and checked into a small motel across town. I needed space to think, to plan, to figure out my next move. I couldn't fight them legally. I didn't have the money for the kind of lawyers I'd need, but there had to be another way. I started by going through everything I had from my grandmother. Every letter she'd written me, every document she'd given me, every conversation we'd had about her wishes. And then I remembered something. 3 years ago, my grandmother had started keeping a video journal. She'd wanted to record her memories, her stories, everything she wanted to pass down. I'd helped her set up the camera, taught her how to use it. Those videos had to still exist. I drove back to the house the next morning when I knew everyone would be out. I still had my key. I went straight to her bedroom, to the closet where she kept her personal items. And there, in a box at the back, I found them. Dozens of USB drives, each labelled with a date. I took them all. Back at the motel, I started watching. Hours and hours of footage. My grandmother talking about her life, her regrets, her hopes. And then, dated from March, right after her diagnosis, I found it. She was sitting in her bedroom looking directly at the camera, and she was completely lucid. My name is Eleanor Castellano, and I'm making this recording because I need to make my wishes clear. I've been diagnosed with cancer, and I know I don't have much time left. She paused, collecting herself. I want everything I've built, my house, my business, all of it, to go to my granddaughter, Eve. She's been the only one who's truly been here for me, the only one who cares about preserving what I've created. My children. I love them. But they've proven time and again that they only appear when they need something. My heart was pounding. I've already spoken to my lawyer about updating my will to make this official, but I'm recording this in case anyone tries to contest it or claim I wasn't of sound mind. I am completely aware of what I'm doing. This is my choice, and I'm making it freely. She looked directly at the camera, directly at me. Eve, if you're watching this, it means something went wrong. It means they got to me somehow. I'm sorry, I tried to be strong, but you need to know everything I said, everything I promised you was true. This is yours. Fight for it. The video ended. I sat in that motel room staring at the blank screen and I smiled. I had my proof, but I didn't go straight to a lawyer. Because I realized something important. If I just presented this video, they'd fight it. They'd claim she made it before she changed her mind. They'd say circumstances changed. They'd tie me up in court for years. No, I needed more than proof. I needed to make them reveal themselves. I started with research. I looked into the witnesses who'd signed the new will. Both were friends of my Uncle Vincent. One was his business partner, the other was someone he golfed with on weekends. Neither of them had been close to my grandmother. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Sandra who specialized in elder fraud. I showed her everything I had and she got to work. Within 2 weeks, she'd found something interesting. My Uncle Vincent had taken out a loan 6 months before my grandmother's diagnosis. A big loan, with a payment schedule he was already falling behind on. My father had been fired from his construction job and hadn't told anyone. Morgan was drowning in credit card debt from her shopping habits. They all needed money. Badly. And then there were the bank records. Sandra couldn't get my grandmother's directly, but she got my Uncle Vincent's. And there, 3 weeks before my grandmother died, was a deposit of $20,000, labelled as consulting fee. Where did that money come from? I asked. Sandra showed me. My grandmother's account. A withdrawal made in person with my Uncle Vincent as co-signer on a power of attorney document filed 2 weeks earlier. He'd given himself access to her finances. This is fraud, I said. Probably, Sandra agreed, but you need more if you want to nail him. So I kept digging. I went through the real estate business records. My grandmother had been meticulous about documentation. Every property, every transaction, everything was recorded. And there, buried in the files from the last 6 months, I found transfers I didn't recognize. 3 properties, each worth significant money, had been transferred out of the business into my Uncle Vincent's name. She never would have agreed to that. I had enough. But I wanted one more thing. I wanted a confession. I called my father and asked to meet. Just him, no one else. I told him I was ready to talk about settling everything without lawyers. We met at a coffee shop downtown. He looked tired but relieved. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, Eve. I've had time to think, I said carefully, and I realize maybe Grandma did change her mind. Maybe she did want everyone to be included. His shoulders relaxed. She did. She loved all of us. I just have one question. What's that? How did you convince her? He frowned. What do you mean? She was on heavy medications. She was confused. How did you get her to sign a new will? She wasn't confused. She knew what she was doing. Really? Because I've been going through her medical records and her doctor noted significant cognitive impairment in those last few weeks. His jaw tightened. She had good days and bad days. And you made sure to get the will signed on a good day? Eve, or did you wait until she was too confused to know what she was signing? That's not what happened. Then what did happen, Dad? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you and Uncle Vincent took advantage of a dying woman. He leaned forward, his voice low and angry. We did what we had to do. Do you know how much money she had? How many properties? And she was going to give it all to you. That's not fair. So you made it fair? We made it right? By stealing from her? It's not stealing if it should have been ours in the first place. There it was, the admission I needed. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I'd been recording the entire conversation. His face went white. You recorded this? I did. That's illegal. Actually, in this state, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. I consented. I stood up. I have this. I have video of Grandma stating her wishes. I have bank records showing Uncle Vincent stole money from her. I have property transfers that she never authorized. I have medical records proving she wasn't competent to sign legal documents. And now I have you admitting that you manipulated her. He stood up too, panic in his eyes. Eve, wait. No. I'm done waiting. I'm going to the police. I'm going to the state attorney, and then I'm going to take back everything you stole. You'll destroy this family. You already did that. I walked out of that coffee shop and drove straight to the law offices of Thompson and Associates, the biggest, most aggressive firm in the state. I'd made an appointment days earlier. I laid everything out in front of them. The video, the bank records, the property transfers, the recording of my father, the senior partner, a woman named Catherine Thompson, looked through it all with an expression that grew sharper with each piece of evidence. "This is elder financial abuse," she said, "potentially criminal." "Can we get the house back? The business?" "We can do better than that. We're going to void that will, restore your grandmother's original documents, and then we're going to sue your family for every dime they took." "I can't afford—" "This is exactly the kind of case we take pro bono. Your grandmother was a respected businesswoman in this community. What your family did to her is unconscionable," she smiled. "Let's destroy them." The lawsuit was filed 3 days later. My family's first response was outrage. My father called me screaming about betrayal. My Uncle Vincent left threatening voicemails. My mother sent a long, rambling email about how I was tearing the family apart. But when they saw the evidence, the tone changed. Catherine went scorched earth. She not only challenged the fraudulent will, she filed criminal complaints with the district attorney's office for elder abuse, financial exploitation, and forgery. The witnesses who'd signed the will suddenly couldn't remember the details. My Uncle Vincent's business partner claimed he'd never actually seen my grandmother sign anything. He'd just signed where Vincent told him to. The whole thing unraveled. Within 6 weeks, the court had invalidated the fraudulent will and restored my grandmother's original estate plan. Everything came back to me. But Catherine wasn't done. She went after the money my Uncle Vincent had stolen. She went after the properties he'd transferred. She demanded full financial restitution, plus penalties, plus legal fees. My Uncle Vincent declared bankruptcy. My father had to take out a second mortgage on his house to pay his share. Morgan lost her car. And then the criminal charges came through. The district attorney decided to prosecute. Elder financial abuse is a serious crime, and with all the evidence we had, it was an easy case to make. My Uncle Vincent took a plea deal, 2 years probation and full restitution. My father was offered the same deal. They both took it. Because the alternative was prison. The fallout was complete and devastating. My extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, all learned what had happened. Some of them reached out to me with apologies. Others cut off contact with my father and Uncle Vincent entirely. My mother divorced my father 6 months later. She'd known what was happening but had convinced herself it was justified. When it all came out, she couldn't live with the shame. Morgan moved across the country. We haven't spoken since. I moved back into my grandmother's house, my house, and slowly began putting the pieces back together. I continued running the real estate business, honouring the legacy she'd left me. Some of the properties my uncle had tried to transfer were sold during the legal process to cover his restitution payments. But I kept the ones that mattered most. The house, the core of the business, everything she'd wanted me to have. It took 2 years to fully untangle everything. 2 years of legal proceedings, depositions, court dates. 2 years of my family refusing to speak to me, calling me vindictive, claiming I'd destroyed them over money. But it was never about the money. It was about honouring my grandmother's wishes. It was about protecting what she'd built. It was about justice. 5 years later, I'm sitting on the porch of my grandmother's house, watching the sunset over the gardens I've carefully maintained. The business is thriving. I've expanded it, brought on new agents, honoured her vision while building something that's also mine. I think about her every day. I think about what she'd say if she could see what I've done. I think she'd be proud. My father reached out last year. He wanted to meet, to apologise, to rebuild bridges. I declined. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some betrayals are too deep. I'm not angry anymore. That's the surprising part. For a long time, I was furious. At them for what they did, at myself for not seeing it sooner, at the world for allowing it to happen. But anger is exhausting. And eventually, I realised that the best revenge wasn't making them suffer. The best revenge was building a life so good, so full, so exactly what my grandmother wanted for me, that their betrayal became irrelevant. They took something from me. I took it back. And then I made it better. That's the real victory. If you were in my place, what would you have done differently? And don't forget to tell me. Where are you listening from right now? This is Revenge by Eve, and your voice matters here.
Thanks for watching Revenge by Eve. We hoped you enjoyed the story. See you soon.